Welcome to the Matthew Moran podcast. Here you will find a series of in-depth conversations with the world's best nature photographers, filmmakers, conservationist editors, writers and publishers. You will get an insight into the lives of industry experts and the unsung heroes. What goes on in their minds, how they approach their work, and how they make it pay. The podcast also looks at the role that photography and filmmaking plays in helping to shine a light on the global plight of species. And despite the depressing statistics, we look for solutions of what we can all do to contribute to conservation. All my guests give up their precious time and they are incredibly generous of spirit. Now I'm sharing these conversations with you. Please, you share them with your community, get them out there. Every little bit helps. And that's what we really need right now. I really hope you enjoy this one. Thanks so much for listening. This week, my guest is Kabir Kaul. Kabir is a conservationist, writer and campaigner with a big passion for London's biodiversity. He's made it his mission to shed light on the often overlooked green spaces and the remarkable wildlife that calls London home. At the tender age of 18, Kabir has already achieved a huge amount and he is involved in so many different campaigns and getting powerful messages out there through speaking at rallies, writing his popular blog. You should definitely go and check that out. And this week, he is also presenting on the new magazine show, which is put together by Chris Packham and Megan McCubbin and other great young presenters. It's kind of filling a hole where Autumn Watch used to be. The first week just finished, but on Monday, the 30th, it continues. Kabir is presenting again, so I suggest you check that show out. It's every night, 7:30 p.m. on YouTube. We'll put a link up in Kabir's page. And there are other links to all of his work, his social media. Check him out, give him a follow. He's going to go from strength to strength, I'm sure. And here, you get to hear a little bit more about his journey. So without further ado, here's Kabir. Kabir, welcome along. Thank you so much for doing the trip from northwest London. Where exactly are you?
Eastcote, Middlesex. It's near Ruislip.
Okay, so I kind of knew that you were close to Ruislip, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to say that in a former life, more than 20 years ago now, 25 years ago now, I used to play semi-pro football and I actually played for Ruislip Manor.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, I live 5 minutes away from Ruislip Manor.
There you go. So I've done what you've just done many times, like 3 times a week. I had to get on the Piccadilly line. And
from northwest London to Tottenham, North London.
Tottenham, yeah, exactly. Then I was living in East Finchley and I'd do those 27 stops all the way out to Ruislip and and play football. And it was a great, a great experience. But thanks so much for you making the journey all the way here. I know it's not easy, but I was saying to you before we started recording, this is really exciting to have a face-to-face interview. It's been over a year.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Great. So I much prefer it this way. And yeah, we're back in the Tottenham home studio, home of the podcast. And it's great to welcome you here. And I can't wait to get stuck into, there's so much stuff you've done, even in your tender age of 18. And, but it would be great to hear a little bit about, how you got into wildlife in general. I know you're specifically a bird lover and a bird watcher, but do you have a sort of penny drop moment, or did you kind of gradually get into it over a period of time? Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into it?
The truth is, there was no penny drop moment. I didn't have any particular person influencing me. No one in my family was particularly interested in nature at the time. It was just some kind of organic interest that developed gradually. It could have been when my grandma was watching Planet Earth in 2008 or 2009, and I was 3 or 4. Walked into the room and saw all these amazing animals on screen, the greater flamingos, the pangolins, the armadillos, whatever was in Planet Earth, the African elephants too, whatever was in Planet Earth really captured my imagination. Seeing all these beautiful animals on screen, to know that these existed, this amazing diversity of animals. And I slowly wondered over time, do any of these animals live on my doorstep? Can I see any of them around here? Over time, I became a bit of a a nerd, I bought these animal encyclopedias, many of them. I don't think I paid attention much to the descriptions or the descriptions of the animals themselves, but just looking at the pictures, their distribution, their IUCN status.
Yeah.
I love doing all of that, and that gave me that first introduction to the diversity of species. And there were these beautiful illustrations as well. That was amazing. Just looking at that and seeing everything from a kiwi to a mayfly to a badger, and this unbelievable diversity of life. I didn't think at the time much about wildlife in Britain, wildlife on my doorstep, just interested in animals in general. But then when I first thought about it, I looked into my garden when I was 7 and saw all this wildlife on my doorstep, mainly birds. And that's how I got to birding.
And what age were you around this?
Yes, 7 or 8.
Yeah.
I would see pigeons and sparrows and blue tits, great tits, goldfinches, the usual stuff. And I wanted to find out more. I wanted to find out whereabouts I could see more of these birds, where they live in the local area. So I had Eastcote House Gardens, not too far away from Ruislip Manor, Ruislip Lido, Ruislip Woods. That became my local patch. I'd see a couple of hundred ducks migrating there every winter.
Wow.
To think they'd come from Scandinavia and Greenland and places like that was unimaginable. And they'd come and feed pochard and shoveler mainly. And then there's this area of scrubland to the west of that called Paul's Field, which if you know when and where to look in that field, you can see amazing things like tree pipit and redstart at the right time of year, mainly spring and autumn. But learning about all this, seeing this amazing, this incredible wildlife on my doorstep, mainly birds, got me into birding. And finally knowing that it was in an urban area was very exciting, because despite this very built-up area that I was living in, there was this a vast array of different species in an area where people where it's very packed during the summer, and although there are so many visitors every day, especially during the summer, and there's the railway too, Ruislip Lido still has this wealth of wildlife, and you can see so much at any time of year.
That's brilliant. And I think it's funny, I was thinking as you were talking about being inspired by Planet Earth, certainly I was, I think Attenborough has been an inspiration for so many. And then, seeing all of this exotic stuff. And part of me in the past, because my journey was always about leaving London and, going to wilderness areas abroad, because it was sort of disappointing here. But that's just because, we don't have big cats and we don't have elephants and all of the exotic stuff. So, but it's great to hear you talking about being really excited, and not disappointed. So as a kid, you're watching all of this stuff and then you're going out to your woodland and seeing a pigeon. Like, no, you were actually quite excited about seeing these kind of birds. And I've come to that a little bit later in life, UK wildlife, which of course, as we know, we can come on to talking about that in a bit, the biodiversity here is so bad. But there is really, really good stuff to see here. And, it goes without saying, we're both singing from the same hymn sheet, that there is great stuff to see on your doorstep.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot. When you have the time, when you look around, it doesn't have to be very far. You don't have to go far to see wildlife in general. And whether you start from a colony of ants crawling around a tree to a woodpecker yaffling in the ash tree over here, there's so much to see, but you have to look. And I found that especially during lockdown, I knew there was wildlife on my doorstep. I put out a bird feeder. I planted a few yellow rattle seeds, a few meadow cranesbill seeds, knowing that wildlife was there. But I didn't really pay much attention to what would be there throughout the entire year. It was just every now and then look into the garden, see what happens to be there. But during lockdown, that really encouraged me to look out of the window. And I was trying to find the right window to look at and go bird watch from. I found it happened to be my bathroom window. So I found this completely new view of the local area.
Yeah.
And there was a flock of starlings that came and visit visited.
So were you really annoying to your
morning.
family when they needed to use the loo? You were in there with your binoculars.
It was my bathroom, so my brother's bathroom. So no problems there. But I did open the window, and one day I heard a willow warbler.
Amazing.
There was this fight amongst some of the starlings, and some of the robins were flying between the bushes on either side of the garden. And then I heard the willow warbler singing, and it flew into someone else's garden. But although it was like a fleeting glimpse of that bird, to know it was there was very, very exciting.
That's amazing.
And I think the most unusual, the most surprising sighting from the garden, well, I wouldn't call it a sighting, it was hearing a call. It was in the middle of the night. I was on this WhatsApp group for London birders, and they were talking about this influx of common scoters that had come from the West Country and was flying over. They were flying over the Thames estuary and into northwest London and Ruislip and going towards here in the Lee Valley. And I opened my bedroom window, and I heard this faint. I wouldn't call it quacking, more of a honking in the distance.
Yeah.
And it was a flock of common scoter.
Amazing.
I wouldn't have known that if I wasn't so keen to look at the wildlife in my garden every day.
Yeah.
You never know what you might see.
No, that's
on a given day.
And I think that was the case for so many people during lockdown. It seems like a distant past now, strangely, in the end of 2023. But yeah, that was the narrative that came out and still seems to be so prevalent now, was that people really literally forced to stay at home.
Yeah.
Or, when in the beginning when we were allowed our 1 hour out for exercise or whatever. But I think that was a turning point. I mean, I certainly know that from, in the filming industry, for example, film crews suddenly couldn't go out and photograph tigers in India, but there were perfectly capable and decent Indian wildlife photographers and wildlife filmmakers doing stuff in their local patch. And again, we talk about carbon footprint. Like there's that added bonus of doing something local.
Yes.
Walking to your woods or getting on a train. Everything that I do here, like, it's really close to home. And I've been writing. I was doing a write up yesterday because I'm speaking in a festival in Holland in a couple of weeks. And in the kind of my spiel, I'm saying, well, look, I've had the most success of all of my career doing stuff that's 20 minutes from my house. And and this is not to say, I'm not anti-travel. I'm not saying people shouldn't travel, but I think, look at home first. There is actually really, really cool stuff here. And then there's that second thing of trying to engage people. So I know that it feels like to me, you've done this fast track from the 7-8-year-old kid to being really into it and Planet Earth encyclopedias, to not only satisfying your own interests, but then wanting to reach out to others and get them into what you're into. And do you remember when that came about, or what your mission was and why?
Yeah, so upon discovering this, all the wildlife in my local area, Ruislip, Lido, Paul's Field, I wanted to share my passion for nature with others, people in general at this stage, not any particular age group. So I wrote my blog called Call of the Wild, and I started it.
It's a great name, by the way.
Thank you. And I started it in 2017, and I'd write about wildlife in my garden, or wildlife in Ruislip, or where I travelled recently with my family on holiday. My grandparents, my mum's side of the family, are from the United Arab Emirates, so I'd go and visit them often. And I'd write, whenever I went, I'd write a blog post about what I'd seen. And even in the middle of the desert, there's so much, and I wanted to share my passion for nature wherever I had gone. But I soon found that I was one of very few people that I knew. One of very few people in general, really, who had an interest in nature my age. So there was just me, and that was it, really. So I felt quite lonely. I was quite lonely for a number of years.
Yeah.
But then I was at this local group. I'm quite lucky to have an RSPB local group nearby, because you don't always have one.
Yeah, sure.
So in Pinner, in this historic church, which is over 700 years old, a group of birders and naturalists would meet every month.
Great.
And still do today, to talk about nature and different aspects. They have different speakers each month. And there was a lady there called Jean, and she said, my friends, Kevin and Corin, they run this camp for young people every year as part of the Cameron Bespolka Trust. And the Cameron Bespolka Trust does brilliant work to get children interested in nature and connect each other with nature through nature, very importantly. Connect people who have that interest in nature, because much like I had found, there are very few of us. And then Jean said, why don't you go on this camp? And I didn't know where this was, so I did some more research and found that it was in Thetford at the British Trust for Ornithology, the BTO's headquarters. And in 2018, I went to this camp and got inspiration from many of these young people there, very talented, very enthusiastic, very passionate young people, and they come from all across the country to Norfolk, as far as Scotland and other places. And now, what the British Trust for Ornithology does is fantastic. They've expanded it to all 4 countries of the UK, but it started in Thetford, and we went for a week of birding in Norfolk and Suffolk, in Lake and Heath Fen, in Thetford Forest, in the Nunnery Lakes at the BTO, and again seeing this wildlife that I'd otherwise would have never seen if I hadn't gone to East Anglia, hadn't gone to that camp. And I made friends, and I felt like I was part of a community. But I felt like I belonged for the first time, really, with people who shared the same interest, who spoke the same language, if that makes sense.
Birders have a special language.
Yeah. And your original question was about how did I make that jump between being interested in nature and starting to raise awareness. So it was partly through my blog. I connected with young people through that when I told people at Bird Camp about my blog, but also seeing the wonderful things that they were doing in their local area for wildlife, or sharing their passion through nature, such as wildlife photography, or building nest boxes, or wildlife gardening, making a community garden, or gardening in their school, wildlife gardening in their school. And these were all really inspirational stuff. And I wanted to learn more. I wanted to raise awareness, and that gave me the motivation and the inspiration and the courage. I recently put to bed this project called Nature Reserves of London, because I'd basically given up on it at the time. I was really bored, had been doing it for ages. It's this interactive map, and that gave me the confidence to go ahead and complete it. And it was the first of its kind. There are many maps in London of local nature reserves and designated wildlife sites and wildlife sites in general. But this was the first publicly accessible version where all the nature reserves and wildlife sites were in one place.
Brilliant.
I published that in 2019, and that was, I would say, the start of my campaigning. But that was only because I had the courage from going on that camp and meeting all these incredible people, and who I'm lucky to call friends to this day.
That's a lovely story. Yeah, it's really nice. And I like this idea of, you having this passion, also being very young and like being vulnerable and honest enough to admit that you're lonely, because it can, certainly doing wildlife photography can be a lonely space. And I think we all need to like connect more and get together. I've just been at the Wildlife Photographer of the Year Awards just last week, and you can see it. All the photographers are so happy just to meet other photographers and talk and share. And I was telling you, I've just been on the Missouri Photo Workshop last month, and so much about that is the same thing, is like-minded people getting together with this mission, which is a good mission. Hey, let's go out and tell stories that matter and that tell the truth, especially in this day and age. You're stronger together ultimately. And if you've got people around you that are, into the same stuff, it gives you a bit more of a platform to push forward your ideas. And it's quite a nice segue into my next question or topic that I'd love to talk to you about, because you mentioned campaigning. And you've been doing this for a number of years now, and I'd love to talk to you about this. How you go about doing it, because it's a question I ask a lot of people. How can we make a change? In a world where all the news is so negative, like globally. I know obviously there are local successes, and that's what we must focus on. But what gets you up in the morning, and what gets you kind of like enthusiastic about protecting the nature that you love?
Well, knowing I can make a difference, and there are a number of different tools which you can use to do that. I've got my blog. I will visit I'll visit an area of London and learn about conservationists' work in a specific area of London, whether it's the Thames, the border of the Thames estuary at Bexley, or very recently the Hogsmill Valley in Kingston. That was my most recent blog post, and to draw more attention to the issues and challenges facing those areas, but also the success stories. As you say, there's local successes, and they can be incredible. Whether it's the release of water voles or very recently beavers.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about that. I mean, maybe we could jump in right now and talking about success stories. Like, I saw you were there at that release, and I photographed beaver 6 years ago in Devon, in East Devon, and that was a very exciting project around that time. You know, they'd given these beavers this 5-year license. But yeah, in London, beavers. Yeah. I mean, I know very little about this project, so please tell me and tell the audience about it.
Yeah. So when you're campaigning, you've got all these different tools. There's social media. There's and I often speak as well at different events and different conferences, talks, conferences and meetings. But I think one way in which, as you know, the conservation world is quite small, and Elliot Newton, who lives in Kingston, who I wrote the blog post about, and Sean McCormack, two brilliant people who have done a lot of conservation work in Kingston and in Ealing. They got together with Friends of Horsenden Hill and the Beaver Trust, and one of the tools I used for campaigning was social media. And I got in touch with both of them through social media a number of years ago, 2019 or 2020. And we've kept in touch ever since. Our paths have crossed many times. I've been lucky to work with them a number of times and hear them speak and learn about their work. And they said, we're going to be releasing beavers. I thought, what? Beavers? 20 minutes away from where I live? This is insane. Beavers. And this is London's first urban beaver population. And I say urban because London already has a beaver population in Enfield, but that's the countryside. It's more rural. It's a former royal hunting ground.
Right.
But this was equally very special because with the hard work of Sean, Elliot, and others, armies of volunteers coming into Horsenden Hill, this site in Greenford, and clearing historic litter and making the area suitable for the beavers, and creating a space, erecting a 1.8 kilometre fence, a very high fence around the area to let people in and out, but keep the beavers in. And as well as getting funding from the local council and the Mayor of London. All of this is really hard work to
Unbelievable,
organise.
yeah.
And to have all those volunteers and the amount of time and the amount of effort they're putting into it is a real achievement. And just last week, 5 days ago, they released these beavers, family of 5.
Amazing.
And what I'm really excited about is I hope that apart from inspiring the next generation, there are schools nearby, and hopefully that will capture their imagination. But also people will know that these beavers aren't just in an enclosure. They will be bringing benefits to both the natural and the urban environment by holding water, by slowing the flow of water, improving the water quality, improving carbon storage and sequestration. And at the moment, they're just making themselves at home. They'll be doing that for the next month or so.
Yeah.
And then it'll be there'll be organised trips into the enclosure to see the beavers, or there will be a little bit more access. But at the moment, the beavers are being left alone to do their own thing and manage the habitat as they please.
It's such a great story.
It's really exciting that there are beavers in London.
I know, and that's
in urban London.
Yeah, absolutely, and brilliant. Like you say, just 20 minutes from your house, and probably 5 years ago, who would have thought that? So yeah, those. I mean, that's again, it's the answer to the question of you have to hold on to these brilliant moments of exciting conservation that's going on, in our land. And I remember that from Devon. The beaver was absent for 400 years, something like that. In the UK, and look at what's happening, and we mustn't complain, even though we were like one of the slowest countries in Europe to do all of these reintroductions, but they are here, and of course we do face a lot of rejection around these kind of things and or these kind of conservation movements, but you mentioned the word hard work, and I think that's another thing. And going back to the campaigning, it's kind of relentless, isn't it? We have to just keep doing it all the time if we want to improve nature for the UK and for many people to enjoy it. And I love the fact that you said that there are lots of schools around this area, because if a beaver can't capture a kid's imagination, then we're definitely doomed, because they are one of the coolest animals, aren't they?
They are.
When I was just in the States last month, I was lucky enough to tag on a trip after this workshop and visit the Ozark Mountains, and I went canoeing there, and you see evidence of beaver everywhere, and it just, it's so simple, but I just think, God, this is incredible. This is an animal that can chop a tree down with his teeth, and that's
very
like
cool.
very, very cool, isn't it? Getting kids engaged that way. So yeah, tell us a bit more about your campaigning, and you've mentioned it already, but you've been doing some work with the Mayor of London as well, and I know that are you a youth ambassador for RSPB?
Youth council member.
Youth council member, right? So yeah, tell us a bit about what that involves as well. A few questions, but yeah.
So I wear a number of different hats, number of different organisations, and I mainly bring attention to urban nature and the issues and challenges facing urban nature, but also the solutions, and raising awareness about what urban nature we have, because that's not always something that people think about. It's something that many people definitely don't think about, and I believe there's not enough attention and focus on these areas, especially where most people live. So I do this through a number of different organisations, including the RSPB's Youth Council, and it's a group of fantastic young people from across the country who all have many different. We all collectively do a number of different things. We will use all our own personal experiences and opinions and views to shape our collective view on internal matters, internal policy, but also we will do events and talks and lectures and raise awareness about the RSPB, but as its youth representative,
right?
Because it's very important. There is very little representation of young people in the natural world, in the nature sector. Of course, there's enough activities for the youngest children and for students and young people 18 and above. But in the middle, there's quite a gap.
Right.
So that's the age group I'd say most of us are in, and that's what we do. We provide that youth representation, that youth voice that's needed within the organisation.
Yeah, because it's kind of like what you didn't have when you were 12, 13, 14 was representation.
Exactly. And this was one of the few opportunities that was available to me at the time. I was elected as a youth councillor by the youth membership in 2019. I've had these amazing opportunities since to go to different nature reserves around the country. What it used to be like before COVID was we would meet up in a different place around the country, but now things are mostly done online. But we do occasionally meet up in person.
Great.
When we can, and that's always wonderful.
Yeah, that's lovely.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. Please go ahead if you...
Yeah, you also mentioned the Mayor of London.
Yes.
It was a real honour and a real privilege to be a member of the London Rewilding Task Force.
That's
an
brilliant.
Advisory role at the Greater London Authority.
So how did that come about, that role? How, these roles are great, but, does someone say, hey, Kabir, I've read your blog, or I've seen you on the SIBC show, or, how do these opportunities come about for you?
Well, I campaigned in the later stages of the campaign for the London National Park City, and I met a number of different people within the Greater London Authority and the Mayoralty who had also supported that London National Park City campaign. That was declared in 2019. I spoke at City Hall, and since then we've kind of followed each other on Twitter, myself and the environment team, and we followed each other, and the environment team has seen my work, seen a number of my different campaigns, my Nature Reserves of London map, very recently my 70 nest boxes for 70 years campaign, which I led with a number of different wildlife charities. But then through that connection, I was appointed by the Mayor to be a member of the London Rewilding Task Force, which is this body of advisors which wrote a report on recommendations that the Mayor should accept on rewilding in London. And it provides a framework for large-scale, small-scale urban rewilding, which I think is very unique. and we had the support of C40, the group of cities, and which the Mayor of London is chair of, as well as a number of different organisations. But many of whom were represented on the task force. But it was a real honour and it was a really unforgettable experience, very valuable experience, because not only was I able to contribute my own views and insights into young people and youth engagement in urban nature, which is why I was brought on to provide that perspective, but also learn from people who have been in nature and conservation for 40, 50 years, politicians, financiers, ecologists in urban areas. So many people with such a breadth and depth of experience. It was really incredible, and I'm very lucky to have had that experience.
That's really
thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, that sounds great. And I'm curious as well, when you have people who have 50 years of experience and all of this breadth, as you say, how did they take to a young upstart like yourself coming in with new ideas? How was that experience? And also moving in political circles, can also be, I could imagine, fraught with danger, especially when you're a campaigner and you just want to get stuff done, and then you can suddenly see, oh, there's bureaucracy here and there's bureaucracy over there. What was that experience like?
Well, it was great to learn from everybody. I came in and I learnt. I was introduced to a lot more about different policies, different ways of funding, and historically what has happened in London already. But I think my ideas were certainly taken into account.
Great.
And it was wonderful to be able to have that opportunity to speak. And I talked mainly about engaging young people in the natural world. But the others had an idea of my campaigning and my the things I have done in the past. But it was I think it's fair to say that I was represented there. And the report was published, and I was very, very pleased to see references on young people,
Great.
Recommendations on the importance of getting young people securing those benefits for the long term in rewilded areas, and passing on that knowledge to the next generation so that they can protect it for future generations. These rewilded spaces, these green spaces on their doorstep, no matter where they live, whether it's the London countryside or central London or inner London. So I was very pleased to see those recommendations there. At the moment, it's all about implementing them, and the first stage of that has begun.
That's great.
With a new round of funding, £710,000, I believe, gone into the third round of the Rewild London Fund, which the Mayor has established. The Mayor has created this fund to help what we call rewilding stepping stones, which is average-sized green spaces, not too large, not too small, not like a parklet, and not like the open countryside. These local projects, these local communities who can demonstrate their commitment to securing those benefits for the long term, being more inclusive of the community, involving locals, and it's wonderful because so many of these different projects are happening across London.
That's great. And can you give us any examples? I mean, I was curious about how, you've got this money set aside. How does an area, how do you choose a specific area to work on? Is this what's the strategy behind that? And how is the money spent on what specifically?
Well, to be honest, I wasn't involved in the process of choosing and selecting the sites.
Yeah.
But on a related idea, there were large scale areas that we recommended in our report for rewilding in London, including the Colne Valley, Ruislip Woods, Raynham Marshes, where else? Enfield Chase, and a few others. And we'd done this with the help and advice of the GLA, based on local knowledge and what was already living there, and the potential of the sites to provide benefits for the local community, get local communities involved, and the access, how easily accessible they are to the rest of London and the rest of the local communities. So there's all this different criteria, all these this criteria that was used to select these sites, and the others that the Rewild London Fund, different sites have to bid for this grant. But it's great to see so many people using these to rewild areas on their doorstep, getting lots of people involved, and these can be anything from re-wiggling a river, restoring a river, to a reintroduction like the beavers. Part of the funding from the beavers came from the Rewild London Fund.
Brilliant.
So the money is going into some really important projects around the capital.
And that comes back to another, local success story again. And, I love how London focused you are. And it's already, I remember when I did my book on Hampstead Heath, researching, I think it was a quarter of London landmass is green space. You add up all the parks, the gardens, the allotments, and
47% of London is green space.
47%.
I believe so.
Wow.
Yeah.
So unless like, a large portion of that's been made up in the last 10 years, that's amazing. Yeah. And so, and it's one of the things one of the things I love about living here is just how green this space is, but that's not a given. You still have to create good habitats to, for the species that are already coming here, but to bring in new species.
Yes, at first,
of course,
it might look like a green and pleasant land driving through some parts of the countryside. And this is really the same for most urban areas in Britain and in general. And we've had the State of Nature report recently. Only one in six species is threatened in the UK, is endangered, is at risk of extinction. But this is a common sight around the country where people will see these woodlands or this farmland, and people who have had that lived experience of that change can tell you that this farmland used to have nightingales and these warblers and these insects, but now it's all gone. And that's very much the case in parts of London where areas have become more populated, places have been developed on, built on, and what's left might look very precious. They are green lungs, they are very precious, but they just don't have biodiversity. Some areas are declining many areas are declining in their biodiversity, and many areas are still threatened today. And it's a real shame, because even when areas have statutory designations like SSSIs, there are major infrastructure projects like near in the Colne Valley where I live. There's High Speed 2 being developed, and without going into the debate, it has destroyed ancient woodland and nationally important sites for ducks, migratory ducks in the country. And I used to survey that area for the Wetland Bird Survey, and these areas, despite their SSSI designation, are still being built upon. Wow. So it is a real concern.
Yeah, and you're seeing this firsthand, literally in your own backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awful, isn't it? And like you say, we could do a whole podcast on HS2 and the awful damage that's caused. But we won't, and we'll talk about positive things as well. So I mentioned SIBC, the Self-Isolating Bird Club, which of course Chris Packham and Megan McCubbin started during lockdown. It was a very popular show, hugely popular actually. Bringing very people popular.
Monday to Friday.
Yeah, I know, it's a credible effort. And of course, I was involved in that with the Foxes. This is before I'd even published a book, doing stuff. And that's when I first became aware of you. And
that's when I first learned about your work.
Yeah, I know. That's why we're here today, which is great. It's just so nice. And they're obviously really good at getting young people and engaging with young people.
Yes.
And the importance of that, as well as giving young people a platform. And you've been doing great things ever since, and we are actually both been invited back on, and we should do a plug for the show because this will go out just before it comes out. A slight shift in name, 8 out of 10 bats, which is pretty cool, but same format, and they're going to be doing 2 weeks starting on the 23rd of October, I believe.
I think so.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about what you'll be doing, what they've asked you to do during this show? Yes,
so I will be the urban correspondent, and I will be highlighting two areas. Both happen to be in Ealing. One was the beaver release, so great. I was filming for Chris as well as as part of the London Rewilding Task Force, being there as a task force member. Many others were there. It shows you how small the conservation world in London is. But the other one is Warren Farm Nature Reserve, the campaign to designate Warren Farm in Southall as a local nature reserve, because and it's crazy. A quarter of London skylarks live in that meadow.
Oh wow!
A quarter of the breeding skylarks live there, along with yarrow pug moths, yellow-necked mice, 3 or 4 species of owl. There is a lot in Warren Farm, and there's been various different incarnations of campaigns to protect the site against multiple threats. But the current threat at the moment is that Ealing Council published plans to de-wild most of the sites. That's what I'll be talking about in 8 out of 10 Pats. But about Warren Farm, there has been a lot more traction, a lot more support since those plans were published in January from Chris, from Megan McCubbin, from others, and we have had lots of support. And I back in 2019, when this version of the campaign started, I said to them, why isn't this place a local nature reserve? I mean, look at it, there are skylarks. And they said, let's campaign for a local nature reserve. And thanks to the vision and the work of the Brent River and Canal Society, the Warren Farm Nature Reserve campaign, we have had this great campaign and a petition which has got over 23,000 signatures.
Brilliant.
But despite this huge wave of support we've had recently, the council are still going ahead with these plans. But we will, as you've said before, it takes a very long time to achieve certain things in conservation and in campaigning. But we will keep doing what we need to do.
That's brilliant. And like, we should just say it now, because there'll be people listening to this that might be interested. I mean, certainly I didn't know anything about Warren Farm, but how, we can get on board and sign petitions and help. What would be the best thing to do?
Yeah, so please go to the Warren Farm Nature Reserve website. Just type in Warren Farm Nature Reserve, and there will be a link to the petition. And we've got around 23,000 signatures. But yeah, please do sign and share the petition.
Brilliant. No, we will. It's absolutely. It sounds like an amazing thing to be part of. But out of interest, what was the land? Well, what currently is the land, or who owns it? And obviously, it's been left in some state that's good for wildlife. Otherwise, it wouldn't have all these species there. What's the history of it?
The land is owned by Ealing Council,
right?
It's had a number of different uses. So it was originally a farm, a working farm, but then it was owned by the Inner London Education Authority or Greater London Council, and ownership transferred to the to Ealing Council number of years ago, and they were sports pitches. Warren Farm Sports Ground was its original name, and they had changing rooms. They had these playing fields, but over time eventually the place became abandoned.
Right.
The changing rooms were abandoned. They are a brownfield derelict site now. There have been rare plants sighted on that site, as well as black redstart, a few black redstart sightings in the past. So it does provide a home for some wildlife. But the majority of the site became acid grassland and neutral grassland. Acid grassland is a biodiversity action plan species, habitat, and it's got these rare and endangered red-listed species like skylarks and others like different types of moths and yellow-necked mice and others. But this site became unique because mainly because of the skylarks, but because of the diversity of rare plants on the site as well.
Wow.
There are rare clovers, and there are other types of plants that are very rare. They're very few. Some of the only plants that can only be found in that site in the whole of London or in the whole of Middlesex. It's very rare. But that is because of the acid grassland. These seeds have just been waiting there to grow, and then they've had the right conditions to grow after it was abandoned. And for the last 13 years or so, it's been it's kind of rewilded itself.
Yeah. I mean, that's just incredible, isn't it? It's like if you just protect the land, nature kind of knows what to do. And of course, in some cases where you have invasives, humans have to interfere. But it's one of those stories again. And I'm thinking as you're talking, it's such a, on one hand, we've got a massive housing crisis in London, and then you've got these sites that potentially could be built on, and then the vested interest from both sides. it's such a battle, isn't it?
It's such a challenge to manage different interests. Of course, you need to build houses, but if there are places that are already more suitable, like brownfield site, build on those instead. The Ealing Council already has at least seven different sites in their own sports strategy, which they've outlined to be more suitable to build sports pitches on, because these areas were originally sports pitches and they are therefore more suitable, and they are more suitable than Warren Farm. So it completely baffles me as to why they continue to want to develop on Warren Farm, a meadow that has been reclaimed by nature. But these interests need to be balanced. More houses, of course, will need to be built, but these areas need to be built in a suitable place, not for political gain or for political reasons, being built on nature. In a climate and biodiversity crisis, we need these places for our own health and well-being, and it's not just these species being nice to look at or nice to have. This biodiversity supports us too, and of course helps to fight the climate crisis. We've lost so much of our wildland meadows. There are only 2 to 3% left in the country of what there used to be, and Warren Farm is one of those. So helping to provide that valuable public open space, as well as storing carbon, has a wealth of benefits, and we can't afford to lose it.
That's beautifully put. I think everyone listening to that should certainly be logging on right now and going to sign that petition. Thanks, Kabir. So I want to ask you a few personal questions about, this is, your campaigning is really inspiring, and it's great you're doing so much, and I'm sure you're going to continue to do that. But, things like, what's your favorite bird?
Kingfishers, without a doubt. Kingfisher.
Wow, that's unequivocal, straight up. You know.
I love.
Do you remember your first sighting?
I do. Yeah, I was at Stockus Lake in the north of the Colne Valley in Rickmansworth in Hertfordshire, and it's this very large open body of water, and much like Broadwater Lake, in further down the valley, there are a couple of hundred migratory ducks that feed there every winter. And during the winter, it was during the spring. I think it was April in one spring. I was probably about 10 or 11, and I was going out birding, went to this bird hide, saw this kingfisher just fly past in a straight line. You could see its blue and gold colours, just absolutely gorgeous. And that was an incredible sighting. I will never forget it. But what I love about the kingfisher is not only its colours, because there's nothing like it in the UK. They're so beautiful, but also its characteristics. It flies in a straight line. It looks determined. It looks like it has a plan. It knows what it wants to do, and it's very resilient in the way it hunts. It will wait for such a long time, and will not stop until it succeeds, until it's caught a fish. And I often think to myself, in hard times, I need to be like a kingfisher, be more confident. I'll get through this.
That's a great inspiration. It's nice to hear you talk so passionately about these encounters. And I wonder, with all the work that you're doing, and you're about to embark on a gap year, and I know you're going to go to Birmingham University. You're a busy person. Like, how do you find time to actually go out and birdwatch for yourself and do what has got you into this in the first place, and what got you hooked? Are you good at making time to go out and see stuff?
It's something I'm still trying to do, especially during my gap year, where I've got a lot of things planned, and often I need to try and find more time to go out and do what I love, go out birding. And I have been doing it more often, and it's been wonderful to reconnect with green spaces and nature in general after such a long time. I was doing my A-levels for 2 years. I didn't go out birding. I went out birding sometimes, but not very often. Not even down the road to Ruislip Lido.
Wow.
So it was quite a hard time. But it's great to be getting back into what I love doing, like this, and doing more of what I love. But that includes birding, and I hope during my gap year, which has recently started, I can do more of that throughout until September, and hopefully find a place in Birmingham too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you will. You've got that tenacious spirit. I was curious about, we've already talked about what you do to, inspire other people, but thinking about, where would someone start? I mean, it seems like you had a really natural kind of process into it, being at your grandmother's house, watching Planet Earth and like reading encyclopedias, there'll be a lot of young people that don't have that kind of natural drive or passion. And, how do you try and foster excitement in someone else? And how can you, and, we were talking earlier also about this issue of the wildlife world, the conservation world, certainly the wildlife photography world is, mainly white people. And what the wildlife photography is getting better in terms of the mix of female photographers around. But, people like yourself, being a youth ambassador and, being involved with the Mayor of London office, this is, someone looking at you could potentially be, it could be really, really inspiring for them. And, is there anything that you do or can do to get younger people, more involved?
Well, there's a number of different ways. I think what I do with my work, I don't know if you find the same with your photography, can't really measure the impact sometimes.
No, that's right.
So you never know. Someone might have seen one of your fox photos and said, "Oh, that's amazing. I want to get outside and see if there's a fox on my road." And I hope that has happened. I'm sure it has, but it's impossible sometimes to measure that kind of impact. So I'm hoping that one day there'll be someone who says, well, if he's doing it, then I can do it. But I think the best place is to start with education, because if you entrench something into the education system, like a natural history GCSE, which we will fortunately get in a few years, then there will be a greater chance of more people taking that qualification or that course, or enjoying themselves in nature, but in a school environment where the school can provide the resources and gives the students the time to explore and learn about the natural world in a real world context. It's not just theory and scientific processes. They are important. That is what's being taught in schools at the moment. But in education now, what we really need is some more real world experience, learning about those interrelationships in the local area, getting hands-on. When children get hands-on in nature, they will feel part of it. They'll develop those experiences. Not everyone will develop a passion for nature, but they will develop that knowledge and that and a bit of enthusiasm too. And that's what I hope. And in my school, I set up a wildlife society with the help of my headmaster, who fortunately is a birder, a very keen birder. So he helped me, and we did some great stuff. We I think our highest turnout was 14, 15 people, but we had around 8, 9, 10 people from my year group. And we would do a number of things like walk around the school site. We did a big schools bird watch one year. Didn't see very much, but at least got some of my friends and peers thinking.
Great.
We've had another member of staff who is also a birder who's been really passionate. He's been digging a pond in school. We've got some frogs and newts.
Brilliant.
We've got some more focus on biodiversity and planting wildflowers and plans for a hedgerow in the past. So it's been great. And I think, however, while what my school has done and is doing is really good, that is not necessarily going to be the same everywhere else. So my hope for the future here would be that we need to entrench something in the curriculum, and that will come with a natural history GCSE. That's a very good start. But we need more practical experience so that people of all ages, all backgrounds, all ethnicities can get involved and feel like they're part of something, feel more confident, where if they may have an interest in nature and they may not have the people around them to support them, or something will prevent them from being supported or bringing out that passion, that they have that opportunity available to them. I think it's very important that we get that right across the country.
And you're right. It's like if it's there, like, you study maths, science, English, and if that GCSE is there, you're right. It's casting a wider net of potentially of catching, people like you say that don't have that support network around them, like you or I had in our childhood. It's great that something will be there that could pick up new Kabirs or new anyone else's to go out and start loving it, and then by loving it you ending up wanting to protect it. It really sounds like a great thing. I was curious about, we mentioned a little bit about your gap year. You've obviously worked really hard to over the last couple of years doing your A-levels. Do you have any plans to travel at all? I mean, what are you going to do during this? You've got this whole year, first time in your life, you've got a whole year off, essentially. I know you're a hard worker naturally, but are you going to give yourself some downtime?
Yeah,
what are your plans?
Hoping to go to different parts of the country, see different nature reserves, see different areas. And I don't have many plans other than my work experience, which I'm learning more about urban land management and environmental policy, to get more depth of knowledge in those areas. But also, I think it's something I need to figure out. Just, I guess, meet more people, go out birding more often, and relax. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've earned it. And do you think, in 5, 10, 20 years, do you have those visions of where you might like to be and what you might like to be doing? What are your hopes, wishes, and dreams?
For a long time, I wanted to be a broadcaster, and still do. And not as a full-time nature presenter, but presenting documentaries every now and then, especially in urban areas. And I'd want to. I feel like I would love to still raise awareness about nature here in London, but I would love to see other cities as well as London, around the country and in other parts of the world. And that will be a gradual process. I don't know if I'm going to be doing that during my gap year, but I'm going to go to Birmingham next year, and that'll be a good start.
Yeah.
So there's that, but also I hope that that more people would get involved in the natural world, very simply, and notice, and I like to say notice, appreciate, and protect the natural world. There are a number of stages through which people need to go to gaining that sense of stewardship, and that this is my local area, or this is biodiversity in my city or in my town, and I wish more people were connected in that way. I am hopeful for the future that there will be more of these opportunities available to the general public, but at the moment, not enough focus is directed towards urban areas where most people will be living. And 60, I think it's 68% of people in the world will be living in urban areas by 2050. That's more than 2/3. Wow. So we really need that focus. And the other thing is, I hope that politicians of any party will take I think there is a good. I hope they can take the climate and nature crisis seriously. There is a good focus on the climate crisis. Politicians tend to talk about the climate crisis, but that is often talked about separately, without any mention of the nature crisis or the biodiversity crisis. And we need more focus on that, more viable and stronger and clearer policies on those. And we're going to have a general election next year, and whichever party wins needs to have that focus on the natural world in addition to climate change. Need to realise those two aspects are intertwined, and local action is going very well. On the regional government, and here in London, we've got the London Rewild Fund, the task force, and many community projects, and I imagine that is the same in many cities across the UK as well. There are people who are taking the matters into their own hands as well to protect the natural world, and there's a number of different campaigns I've come across around the UK in cities, but it can't just be down to local people. That simply isn't enough. So we need those policies, and I think that would be my wish in the short-term future. In the long-term future, it would just be for more people to learn about nature and protect nature in urban areas.
Kabir, that's brilliant, and it's been so lovely talking to you. It's whizzed by. We've been speaking for an hour.
Wow, doesn't feel like an hour.
No, it doesn't, does it? And what we'll do is we'll put all the links up, certainly direct people to your blog and your social media in the notes on my page. And it's funny, as you're talking like so passionately and so brilliantly there, after me asking, are you going to relax during your your year off? And you said, yeah, but you're going to also get really stuck into some things.
I've just remembered one more thing.
Yes.
One way in which I've recently got or aimed to get more children involved in nature, and of course it's often difficult to measure that impact, as I've said already. But I think my second major project or campaign has been the 70 nest boxes for 70 years campaign.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because I wanted to ask you about this in more detail, because I had a meeting with the head teacher at my daughter's school, and I mentioned that you were coming here on Monday, and I said, look, I need to find more out about this. So
yeah,
actually, rather than just telling me privately, tell the audience, because it's a brilliant campaign.
Okay, are we still on?
Yeah,
on
totally.
Okay,
let's
great.
do it.
So I had this idea back in 2021. And I thought the Platinum Jubilee's coming out. The Queen will be on the throne for 70 years. It'll be her 70th year on the throne. Why not get more children involved in nature, using the Platinum Jubilee as a vehicle to do so, to commemorate the Platinum Jubilee, but inspire more children to learn about wildlife in their school grounds where it's accessible to them, no matter where they are in London. So I got together with the wonderful Cameron Besbolka Trust and Swift Conservation and CJ Wildlife, these three charities. And Swift Conservation provided the Swift boxes. CJ Wildlife provided the majority of the standard garden nest boxes. And the Cameron Besbolka Trust also raised the profile of the campaign as well and ran the campaign. So it was phenomenal. I did not expect the reception that we got from this, but our aim was to get 70 nest boxes into 70 schools across London, 70, one nest box for each year of the Queen's reign. So
Brilliant.
We got this large spreadsheet and kept track of all the different schools that were signing up. First school to sign up was my school in Harrow, in Pinner, and it was great to see the response. We ran the campaign between January and March, and we didn't get 70. We got 106 nest boxes,
goodness.
And it was unbelievable. And what's more is that these schools were in 28 of the 33 London local authorities, so the vast majority, even in the City of London,
Brilliant.
in the very centre of London, and in Westminster.
Yeah.
So that was a real success. And I got these pictures from head teachers of schools from these schools who had hung up their nest boxes. In fact, one was down the road here, Haringey Learning Partnership.
Oh, brilliant.
And I think that's Haringey Learning Partnership, and they had signed up. They put their photos on social media. Great. That was great.
Great.
In fact, here in Haringey, I think it was one of the boroughs with the most schools to sign up, around something crazy like 8 or 9.
Brilliant.
So that was amazing.
Well, you and your people did a great job of obviously getting the message out there as well to reach these people.
And we used Twitter, and we got the support of people like Chris Packham and the urban birder David Lindo, and they promoted the campaign, and so did the Greater London Authority. They liked and retweeted, quote tweeted sometimes, the last nest box of the campaign went up in the Downing Street garden. So I was invited to this Downing Street lunch to celebrate the Jubilee, and volunteers, government recognised volunteers. I was recognised with a Point of Light Award back in 2020 for my work, and I was invited to Downing Street. Unforgettable experience. But I handed over this nest box to them, and I got this letter in the post from the then Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and he said, thank you for this nest box. And I told the civil servants, make sure it's kept out of the reach of Larry.
Yes, the cat. That's brilliant. And there's a lovely photo of you outside number 10 of on your website with that nest box. Kabir, what a brilliant and hopeful and wonderful way to end this podcast. And thank you so much for coming along, and we'll really look forward to hearing more about your gap year and following your journey in the future.
Thank you, Matthew. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks so much to Kabir. What a delightful young man, and what a brilliant conservationist. And I just love his attitude at this age. Not disgruntled, not moaning, just doing stuff, getting out there, getting local people engaged. It's so important. And yeah, I can't wait to see how his life and how all of his campaigning unfolds over the next few years. So follow him. He is more active at the moment currently on Twitter. His handle is Call of the Wild. I love that name. That's his surname, Kaul of the Wild UK. And that's also his handle on Instagram. Go and check out his blog on his website. All the links are over on his page, on the podcast section on my website. And yeah, let's give him the support that he needs to continue to get the message out there. He is also featuring this week on the 8 out of 10 Bats magazine show that Chris Packham and Megan McCubbin have put together with some brilliant young presenters. I'll be featuring on that as well with an update about the Fox work. It is kind of replacing Autumn Watch, which was bizarrely cancelled by the BBC. And again, I love what these guys are doing, just getting out there and filling it with great content. It's a really cool show. First week was brilliant. It starts again on the 30th, 7:30 every night on YouTube. You can watch it worldwide. All right, that's enough for me. Got another great guest lined up. I know there's been quite a gap between podcasts. Sorry to my regular listeners. Sorry to Marcus Westberg especially. He's my biggest fan and always pushing me to do more. And I'm doing it, Marcus, I promise. All right, thanks again for listening. So get this out there, share it with your community. It's a big resource, lots of great people, and I'm going to continue to find great people. So stay posted.